copies out of the box and people could read along. And I forgot to ask him to bring the box along. Sorry. But there's not too many pages left. So this is page 635, and it goes to 678. It's a big book. Srila Prabhupada had, here we go. So many people had joined together in their love and respect for Srila Prabhupada, but even after his departure, the controversy over the Govardhan Parikrama continued. You know the controversy of the Govardhan Parikrama? Does anybody not know what that is, and I should explain? You all know what it is. Okay. Prabhupada was in an emaciated condition. Literally skin and bones. And this and that and the other thing. And devotees were coming from different places. Lokanath, I guess he was a sannyasi at that time, the book just says Lokanath, came from his padayatra. Prabhupada heard his report. He said, I want to go. I want to go to all the tirthas and all of India. Get a bullock cart. Let's go. And the devotees wanted to do what Prabhupada wanted, but so there were two camps. Those that said, we have to do what the spiritual master wants. That's it. We don't question what he wants. We have to do what he wants. And there are others that were his caretakers, and they knew that he wouldn't live. The roads are bumpy, and so on and so forth. The Kaviraj said he won't last for more than an hour, maybe two at most, and then he'll finish. And Prabhupada said it'll give me life. So every time anybody said anything in opposition, he would defeat it. So they went and got a bullock cart, rented one for a day with rubber tires. But that doesn't mean it's not bumpy. And then what's the name of the my mind is stuck on Krishna Das Kaviraj, but the devotee, the disciple of Bhakti Siddhanta that chanted 60, so many rounds, and Prabhupada called him a pure devotee. His name was something. That sadhu came, and immediately Prabhupada, expressed enlivenment, and they asked, what should we do? And he said, well, I'll go with him. And then they took him to a separate room and said what the issue was. So when he came back and said he shouldn't go. And then Prabhupada said, okay, I won't go. I mean, it was further discussion. So there were two groups, controversy. Do whatever the spiritual master says, don't question it. And the others were understanding that afterwards that Prabhupada was just stirring their emotions, transcendental emotions of attachment for him, this way and that way. In different emotions, some protective of his well-being, some submissive to whatever he wants without thinking of whatever the consequences are. And there's persons that were saying nothing. Satsarup Maharaj was saying nothing. Giriraj Maharaj said nothing. Jagadish said nothing. It was a controversy. He ended up not going, and very shortly thereafter, he left his body without going out in a bullock cart and bouncing around. The argument was, get stronger. We'll make a plan. Let's make a plan. We'll go to all the tirthastans in the whole of India, but get your strength back. The Kaviraj is making some headway. This and this and this and this are symptoms. He's making some headway. Please just get some strength, and then we'll take you. We'll go with you. How would you like it done? And they talked the plan, but he didn't go. And it was clear to many that he was just churning their emotions, making them mad in their attachment for him. So that's what this reference is. But even after his departure, the controversy over the Govardhan Parikrama, and it was Govardhan Puja Day, that was the day they were going to go out and camp under a tree, and said, it's so cold. Anyway. And the feelings remained strong on both sides. I still couldn't determine who had been right. And the question persisted in my mind. My usual practice had been to chant japa in Prabhupada's rooms when he was out. And the day after he was placed in samadhi, I was chanting behind his bed in a small corner by a bookshelf when my eyes fell upon the new volume of Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Volume 2, that had been made for Prabhupada with gold embossing. When I opened it, I happened to land upon Chapter 9, Mother Yashoda binds Krishna. I read a few verses and purports, and then I came to a verse that I felt answered my question. This is Giriraj, first person. Quote, "Oh, Maharaj Parikshit, this entire universe, with its great, exalted demigods like Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, Lord Indra, is under the control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, yet the Supreme Lord has one transcendental attribute. He comes under the control of his devotees. This was now exhibited by Krishna in this pastime." Paragraph. The pastime was encapsulated in the previous verse, which is, because of Mother Yashoda's hard labor, her whole body became covered with perspiration, and the flowers and comb were falling from her hair. When child Krishna saw his mother thus fatigued, he became merciful to her and agreed to be bound. When I read the verses, I thought, this is what happened. The spiritual master was the transparent medium through which Krishna manifested himself. Of course, in Braja Bhakti, the relationship with Krishna was different. Krishna exhibited Nara Leela, or human-like pastimes, in which there was complete intimacy and freedom between the devotees and the Lord, whereas in the relationship between the disciple and the spiritual master, there was always an element of awe and reverence and duty. Still, duty was meant to lead to love. Prabhupada had said to Babaji Maharaj, what's his name? Krishna Das Babaji? I think it's Krishna Das Babaji. Krishna Das Babaji. Huh? No. Krishna Das Babaji. Prabhupada had said to Babaji Maharaj, quote, "Just see how much they love me," unquote. During the incident, a month before, when the disciples had appealed to Prabhupada to stay longer, which meant him drinking, and he had accepted their plea, he had said, "This is real affection." Paragraph. When I read the verse, I thought of the two incidents and put them together. In both cases, when the disciples had expressed themselves, "We want you to stay," Prabhupada had approved, saying, "This is real affection," and "Just see how much my disciples love me." Paragraph. As the devotees in the controversy had been acting on the basis of their realization of their devotion for Prabhupada, and Prabhupada had been drawing out our loving feelings and encouraging us to go beyond just following his orders. Following the order was a given. There was no question. To follow the order of the spiritual master was a basic principle of spiritual life, and to disobey his order would be an offense against him and the holy name. So it's not a question of disobeying the order of the spiritual master, semicolon. It was about developing loving feelings for the spiritual master and expressing them to him, relating the verse to what Prabhupada had done with us, I saw a parallel between the Damodar Lila and that principle of spontaneous love. Every night during the month of Damodar Kartik, we recited the Damodar Astaka, including Iti Driksha Labhir Ananda Kunde, gives the translation. The Damodar Lila was meant to show the special power of pure, spontaneous love to conquer the Lord. The Lord came under its control. Similarly, Prabhupada had brought love out from deep within the recesses of our hearts. And then he had reciprocated with us by coming under the control of that love by agreeing to our loving requests. Bardrash, in his Bardrash told me later, I came to the conclusion that it was just fine the way it was. No one was right or wrong. It was all acceptable. In these personal exchanges with Prabhupada, we cannot judge, we cannot fault or praise them. In their reciprocation with Prabhupada, each devotee received a particular gift, a personal gift, an instruction or a lesson from him in that interplay, which was almost like a dramatic performance. Everyone was affected in a very special and personal, intimate way. It was rasa, an exchange of transcendental mellows, unquote. Prabhupada's final pastimes have been very deep. Among the disciples around him at the end, it was understood that as the perfect Acharya, he had taught us by his own example how to live in Krishna consciousness. And then he was teaching us how to die in Krishna consciousness. He was showing us how to retire to a holy place and how to be absorbed in hearing the holy names of the Lord. Up until the end, even in his delicate condition, he was trying to push forward the mission and was translating and dictating purports to Srimad Bhagavatam. And as an important part of that final lesson, he was bringing us to a more intimate level of exchange where we could express to him our heart's deepest desires. There were natural boundaries between the disciples and spiritual master, and Prabhupada had always reminded us of those if he felt we were becoming too familiar. But in these final hours, he inspired us to reach out and express our love for him and ask him to stay with us. Break. Soon after Prabhupada left, amidst all the grief and activity, I asked him, "O Krishna, whether there was any service I could do." "Not now," he said, "later. Why don't you write an article about Srila Prabhupada and his departure, which we can send to our friends and devotees?" So, submerged in feelings of separation, I began by quoting Bhagavatam 10, because it's come up several times. Prabhupada liked his writing. He said, you should do this service. He, along with many other things, but he took it up. He's a good writer. 10:48:26, quote, "Who can surrender to anyone other than yourself?" Speaking to Krishna. "Who is as dear, truthful, friendly, and grateful as you? You are so perfect and complete that even though you give yourself to your devotee, you are still full and perfect. You can satisfy all the desires of your devotee and even deliver yourself unto him," unquote. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, is the most beloved personality, I wrote, and Srila Prabhupada was just like him. We loved him as the dearest personality, the life of our soul. He came from the spiritual world to tell us of our real life with God and to show us the kindness of God. He passed so many days with us in this miserable world. He was a divine personality. He was not of this world, semicolon. He was never of this world. He came to show us God. Everything about him was perfect, and his sublime presence demonstrated perfection in every respect. His beautiful body, his sympathetic face, his compassionate glance, his sweet words, his joyful smile, his appreciative eating, his profound voice, his peaceful resting, his ecstatic dancing, all were perfect from another world. He was everything to us, our mother, father, friend, companion, guide, master, child, life itself. How can we bear being separated from him? How can we tolerate such a loss? Paragraph. Now he has left us here to carry on his mission, waiting for the day when we will again be with him and have the chance to serve him personally. Paragraph. You, this is from Nectar Devotion, you are the life and soul of the inhabitants of Vrindavan. So, because you have left Vrindavan, all the servitors of your lotus feet there are suffering. It is as if the lake filled with the lotus flowers dried up from the scorching heat of separation from you. Nectar Devotion, chapter 38. So, paragraph, this is Giriraj's writing, continuing. Now he has given us a grave responsibility to carry on his movement in separation. He has invested us with his mercy to continue his great work, and we pray that we will be able to accept his divine grace properly. The whole world is feeling his absence, praying for his mercy. He has left a very insufficient vessel to carry that mercy, but still I pray that he will make me fit to carry his divine grace. Paragraph. He will be with us for so few years. He was with us for so few years, semicolon. We hardly had a chance to appreciate him. His every moment with us was full of life, but we were so dull we could not appreciate him, and suddenly he was gone. One devotee said that his appearance was like a flash. He came of his own sweet will to deliver us, and of his own accord he left. But future generations will note how his brief presence changed the entire course of history. I am not elevated enough to think of humanity. Mainly, I think only of myself. But I also felt that his appearance was like a flash, so brief, but it completely altered my life. Paragraph. Actually, he was like Krishna. Krishna's complexion is compared to a cloud, his yellow dhoti to lightning, and his merciful pastimes to rainfall. Similarly, Prabhupada appeared with his swarthy complexion, his saffron dhoti, and his loving exchanges, just to enliven our transcendental senses, to remind us of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Paragraph. When lightning flashes across the sky, the whole world is lighted in all directions. The dark night is illuminated, and we see the entire landscapes of fields, trees, houses, roads, persons, everything. In this way, his divine presence showed us an entire spiritual realm, giving us a vision of our real life, our real home, a transcendental world with kalpavriksha trees, chintamani stones, surabhi cows, and liberated personalities like him, all engaged in pastimes of love with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. His electric presence sent a current through our hearts and we will never be the same again. Paragraph. He's still writing. When lightning flashes across the sky, only a few people may see it. But soon thereafter, deep sounds of thunder rumble through the sky, and everyone hears them and feels their vibration. Although only a few may have been fortunate enough to perceive Srila Prabhupada directly, everyone is hearing the thunderous roar of his message, his books, his Vani, the big mridanga, the printing press, rolling on, vibrating everywhere. I will never die, he said. I will live in my books, and you will utilize. Unquote. A sleeping person may miss a flash of lightning, but the sound of thunder will surely awaken him from his slumber. Similarly, although we were so engrossed in nescience that we could hardly realize who Srila Prabhupada was or what he came to show us, the thunderous vibration of his message of love is reverberating, resounding in our hearts. Paragraph. After the deep reverberation of thunder, the sky opens up and pours down rain. Similarly, Srila Prabhupada's rainfall of mercy is showering down upon the fallen souls. He opened our eyes with light and implanted the seeds of bhakti with transcendental sound. Now his rainfall of mercy is showering down upon us, giving water to the devotional creeper and helping it to grow up to his lotus feet. And he recites his pranam mantras. The instructions of the Acharya are always accompanied by his mercy, his helping hand. In May, when Srila Prabhupada was thinking of leaving us, he commented, "The trouble is, you're all like children." When we asked, "If the father leaves the children, is that very good?" He replied, "The children will be provided for." And now we are experiencing how he is arranging for our care and maintenance, though he is invisible to our eyes. Quote, "I may be going," he had told us, "but Guru Maharaj and Bhaktivinoda Thakur are there. I have asked them to kindly take care of all of you, my transcendental children." The grandfather always takes care of the children much better than the father, so do not fear. Paragraph. Actually, when he was with us, we were always afraid that he would leave us. This transcendental anxiety increased our attachment for him even more. Quoting Nectar Devotion, quote, "My dear Lord, when we are away from you, we become so anxious to see you again, and there is great misery in our lives. But then, when we do see you, there immediately comes the fear of separation. Under the circumstances, both when we see you and when we do not see you, we are subjected to different kinds of tribulation." Chapter 33, Nectar Devotion. He made us so attached to him that we cannot imagine living without him. Now we will have to follow him back to Krishna. He gave us a taste of nectar, and now he has gone away. What remains for us to do? We can only chase after his footprints, shouting Krishna, Krishna. Otherwise, what attraction did we have for Krishna? He came to attract us and free us, and now also he has left us to lead us. He has left us to lead us back to Godhead. Nectar Devotion, Chapter 38. As the swan loves to dive into the water among the lily flowers and would die if he were taken from the water, so we only wish to be with you. Our limbs are being shrunken and faded because you have been taken away from us. It's continuing writing. When the rain falls, people collect it in pots so that they can later drink and distribute the water to others. In the same way, Srila Prabhupada has made receptacles for his mercy so that others may also drink. He has created Vaishnavas, Sannyasis, Brahmins, Gurus, all for the sake of distributing his mercy. Actually, simply by his desire, the entire universe is liberated. Quote, whatever a pure devotee wants from his master, Lord Krishna, doubtlessly, this is a Chaitanya Charitamrita quote, Madhya Lila chapter 15. Whatever a pure devotee wants from his master, Lord Krishna doubtlessly grants, because he has no duty other than to fulfill the desire of his devotee. If you desire the deliverance of all living entities within the universe, then all of them can be delivered, even without your undergoing the tribulations of sinful activity. Whosoever's welfare you desire immediately becomes a Vaishnav, and Krishna delivers all Vaishnavas from the reactions of their past sinful activities. Quote, the next paragraph. The rainfall of Srila Prabhupada's mercy is inundating the entire universe. What is the value of our pots? Only to enliven us in devotional service, to free us from material absorption. He has given us so much responsibility for spreading his movement. I think this is what Krishna desires, he told us. I have come to you, but now in this old age, I may be going to Vrindavan, and you will be coming there to me and be trained up, and we will spread this movement all over the world. Thank you, Srila Prabhupada. We are eternally yours. Break. 4 days after Prabhupada's disappearance, on November 18th, Gopastami, the date when Krishna came of age and was given charge of the cows, to fulfill Srila Prabhupada's desire to go on parikrama and to have his association along the way, the devotees took a small brass deity of him to Govardhan Hill. We set out after Mangalarti, with Prabhupada present in his small deity form and a large framed photo. The deity was placed in the back seat of his car between Upendra and Tamal Krishna. Bhavananda, Chutananda, and a devotee driver sat in the front. Other devotees, including me, followed in a bus. We went first to Radhakund, and Prabhupada's deity was placed on the Sangam, the strip between Radhakund and Shamakund, where there is a shrine with Govardhan Shilas. As we performed kirtan, I had the clear realization that the deity and Srila Prabhupada were the same. The deity was actually him. There was no difference. I began to cry. But I was happy. Prabhupada was right there, still with us. Prabhupada had told, it's Krishnadas Babaji, quote, you will take bath in Radhakund on my behalf, unquote. And Tamal Krishna had said, we'll get you better, Srila Prabhupada, and you will also be able to take bath there personally. Krishna will make our words come true. And there he was. Achyutananda performed an Abhishek ceremony, and Prabhupada's golden form was lowered into the cool water of Radhakund. 3 times he bathed as we gazed at his body in the water. Then Jayapataka carried Prabhupada on his head and bathed him 3 times in Shamakund. Prabhupada was dried and dressed in a new silk cloth, placed on his palanquin, and offered full arati as the devotees chanted Jai Srila Prabhupada, and then with kirtan we circumambulated those 2 most sacred ponds. Paragraph. Next, we went around Govardhan. where we carried Prabhupada in procession on his beautifully decorated palanquin. As we circumambulated the mountain, Tamal Krishna recounted, no longer did our hearts burn from separation. We were with Prabhupada again. We were so glad to see him riding again on his palanquin, leading us as always, giving us shelter. It was a cool day, and our walking created dust, the whole atmosphere becoming filled with dust. We could only remember Krishna coming home from tending the cows. Paragraph. When we got to Govindakund, where Sri Madhavendra Puri had found the Gopal deity and Indra had performed Abhishek to Krishna, we stopped, listened to Nectar of Instruction, verse 9 to 11, and sprinkled some of the sacred Kund water on Prabhupada's head. Paragraph. As we proceeded, the devotee spoke only of Prabhupada, remembering his pastimes and recounting his glories. We especially recalled his 2 final weeks, which had been so sweet, appreciating how he had given us his last months solely to deepen our love for him. By his mercy, he had simply laid on his bed week after week with no other purpose than to attract us. As we wound around the hill on its uneven paths, 8 miles, taking us 3 hours, Tamal Krishna reflected that Prabhupada could have made this journey only in his present eternal form. Next, we drove to beautiful Kusum Sarovar, where Prabhupada was placed high in a covered garden house, and the devotees took pleasure sporting in the water, jumping and frolicking and swimming. Recorded devotional music was broadcast across the Kund, and at one point, the Vandeham album began to play. It was an early album that Prabhupada had recorded in around 1968, and I had listened to it and loved it when I was a new devotee in the old Boston temple. When I heard the music again, it was just too much. I burst into tears. That evening we all sat down and relished a feast, and then returned to Vrindavan, back to home with Prabhupada, Tamal Krishna wrote. Weary as we rode in our car, it had been a wonderful outing because Prabhupada had been present. Considering Srila Prabhupada's last desire to go around Govardhan, Lokanath reflected, his followers, his disciples, did take him, a small brass murti of him, and hundreds of devotees and friends and well-wishers went. We were all thinking of Prabhupada, so we were carrying him in our minds and in our hearts. How could Prabhupada not be there? He was very much there. Paragraph. After the exhilaration of the outing to Govardhan, during which we had felt Prabhupada's presence so strongly, I was again beset with deep feelings of separation. I was constantly on the verge of tears, and any slight remembrance of him could set me off. I was also concerned about our future without Prabhupada's personal presence. What would happen to us individually as devotees? What would happen to the movement? How would we function? I recalled an exchange almost 6 years earlier when we had been living in the Thai hut in Juhu. One of the devotees had mentioned Prabhupada's ultimately leaving us, and Srimati had responded, ISKCON without Prabhupada? It's hard to imagine. Looking for solace and guidance in Prabhupada's books, I came across a section that addressed the disappearance of the spiritual master, 428, 45 through 55. Some passages encouraged me that my lamentation over Prabhupada's departure was justified, some that I could regain his association by serving his instructions. In text 47, stated, quote, being now alone and a widow in that forest, the daughter of Vidarbha began to lament, incessantly shedding tears, which soaked her breast, and crying very loudly. In his purport, Prabhupada had written, quote, figuratively, the queen is supposed to be the disciple of the king. Thus, when the mortal body of the spiritual master expires, his disciples should cry, exactly as the queen cries when the king leaves his body. However, the disciple and spiritual master are never separated, because the spiritual master always keeps company with the disciple as long as the disciple follows strictly the instructions of the spiritual master. This is called association of vani, words. Physical presence is called vapu. As long as the spiritual master is physically present, the disciple should serve the physical body of the spiritual master, and when the spiritual master is no longer physically existing, the disciple should serve the instructions of the spiritual master. Paragraph. The next verse discussed the chaos or disorder that I anticipated might follow Prabhupada's disappearance. The queen addressed her late husband, "Oh, best of kings, please get up, get up. Just see this world surrounded by water and infested with rogues and so-called kings. This world is very much afraid, and it is your duty to protect her." And in the purport, Prabhupada explained, quote, when an acharya comes, following the superior orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his representative, he establishes the principles of religion as enunciated in Bhagavad Gita. Religion means abiding by the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Religious principles begin from the time one surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is the acharya's duty to spread a bona fide religious system and induce everyone to bow down before the Supreme Lord. One executes the religious principles by rendering devotional service, specifically the 9 items like hearing, chanting, and remembering. Unfortunately, when the acharya disappears, rogues and non-devotees take advantage immediately to introduce unauthorized principles in the name of so-called swamis, yogis, philanthropists, welfare workers, and so on. The main business of human society is to think of the Supreme Personality of Godhead at all times, to become his devotees, to worship the Supreme Lord, and to bow down before him. The acharya, the authorized representative of the Supreme Lord, establishes these principles, but when he disappears, things once again become disordered. The perfect disciples of the acharya try to relieve the situation by sincerely following the instructions of the spiritual master. I was astonished. Veer Giraj writes, Srila Prabhupada was telling me exactly what I needed to know. Quote, the perfect disciples of the acharya try to relieve the situation by sincerely following the instructions of the spiritual master. Paragraph. Still, I had some apprehensions. How would I get detailed guidance from Prabhupada when there was a question regarding which his instructions to apply in a particular complex situation? Which of his instructions to apply? And what would be my qualification to receive such guidance? His answers began in his purport to text 50. Quote, it is the long-standing tradition of the Vedic system that a faithful wife dies along with her husband. This is called saha marana. The wife used to enter the fire voluntarily. When Maharaj Pandu died, He was survived by 2 wives, Madri and Kunti. The question was whether both should die or one should live. After the death of Maharishi Pandu, his wife settled that one should remain and the other should go. Madri would perish with her husband in the fire, and Kunti would remain to take charge of the 5 Pandava children. Paragraph. This indicates, this is still Prabhupada's purport, this indicates that a devotee's wife must be prepared to act in such a way. Similarly, a devoted disciple of the spiritual master would rather die with the spiritual master than fail to execute the spiritual master's mission. As the Supreme Personality of Godhead comes down upon this earth to reestablish the principles of religion, so his representative, the spiritual master, also comes to reestablish religious principles. It is the duty of the disciples to take charge of the mission of the spiritual master and execute it properly. Otherwise, the disciple should decide to die along with the spiritual master. In other words, to execute the will of the spiritual master, the disciple should be prepared to lay down his life and to abandon all personal considerations. The last sentence was my assignment, my challenge. Quote, to execute the will of the spiritual master, the disciple should be prepared to lay down his life and abandon all personal considerations. The next 2 purports explained how that detailed guidance would come. This is pretty valuable, isn't it? Pretty valuable. Kiraj Maharaj. Where do we start? Oh, what page did I start on? Page number?
638.
Huh?
638.
638. No. I've been covering 20 pages. It takes generally, okay. Okay, it was on 635. Okay. The next 2 purports explained how that detailed guidance would come. Quote, in his Paramatma feature, Krishna is the old friend of everyone. According to Vedic injunction, Krishna is sitting with the living entity side by side. According to the Shruti mantra, Dva Suparna Sayuja Sakaya, the Lord is sitting within the heart of every living entity as Suhrit, the best friend. The Lord is always eager to have the living entity come home, back to Godhead. Sitting with the living entity as witness, the Lord gives him all chances to enjoy himself materially, but whenever there is an opportunity, the Lord gives good counsel and advises living entity to abandon trying to become happy through material adjustment and instead turn his face toward the Supreme Personality of Godhead and surrender unto him. When one becomes serious to follow the mission of the spiritual master, his resolution is tantamount to seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As explained before, this means meeting the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the instruction of the spiritual master. It is technically called Vani Seva. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur states in his Bhagavad Gita commentary on verse 241 that one should serve the words of the spiritual master. The disciple must stick to whatever the spiritual master orders. Simply by following on that line, one sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Paragraph, and this is, I guess, still the purport that he's quoting from. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur remarks that unless one is very highly elevated in loving the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one cannot see him as he is. Nonetheless, if one sticks to the principles enunciated by the spiritual master, somehow or other, he is in association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Since the Lord is in his heart, he, the Lord, can advise the sincere disciple from within. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 10.10, Tesham Satata Yuktanam. In conclusion, if a disciple is very serious to execute the mission of the spiritual master, he immediately associates with the Supreme Personality of Godhead by Vanu, Vani, or Vapu. This is the only secret of success in seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Instead of being eager to see the Lord in some bush of Vrindavan, while at the same time engaging in sense gratification, if one instead sticks to the principle of following the words of the spiritual master, he will see the Supreme Lord without difficulty. Srila Bilvamangala Thakur has therefore said, quote, Krishna Karnamrita 107, if I am engaged in devotional service unto you, my dear Lord, then very easily I can perceive your presence everywhere. As far as liberation is concerned, I think that liberation stands at my door, with folded hands waiting to serve me, and all material conveniences of Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha with her, stand with her. Unquote. If one is very highly advanced in devotional service, he will have no difficulty in seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If one engages in the service of the spiritual master, he not only sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but attains liberation. As far as material conveniences are concerned, they automatically come, just as the maidservants of a queen follow the queen wherever she goes. Liberation is no problem for a pure devotee, and all material conveniences are simply awaiting him at all stages of life. There are just 2 paragraphs left in this section. And in the next purport, quote, when the Brahmana asked the woman who the man lying on the floor was, she answered that he was her spiritual master, and that she was perplexed about what to do in his absence. At that time, the Supersoul immediately appears, provided the devotee is purified in heart and by following the directions of the spiritual master. A sincere devotee who follows the instructions of the spiritual master certainly gets direct instructions from his heart, from the Supersoul. Thus, a sincere devotee is always helped directly and indirectly by the spiritual master and the Supersoul. This is confirmed in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Guru Krishna Prasadi by Bhakti Lata Bij. If the devotee serves his spiritual master sincerely, Krishna automatically becomes pleased. Yasya prasadat bhagavat prasada. By satisfying the spiritual master, one automatically satisfies Krishna. Thus the devotee becomes enriched by both the spiritual master and Krishna. Last paragraph. I felt purified and exhilarated. I'd gotten the guidance, the answers I needed in a most encouraging and empowering way. I went to share my discovery with Tamal Krishna and other friends who agreed that Srila Prabhupada was so perfect that he could provide all necessary instruction even after his departure. So the book is the Juhu story. And so we're going back to Juhu because the temple opening didn't happen yet. So this is December 77 through January 78. Grand opening. And I'm going to end, let's see where I'm going to end. There's where I'll end. Okay. 2 weeks after Prabhupada's departure, we held a memorial program in the area between the Samadhi and the entrance to the temple. Inside a large pandal, various dignitaries and Gaudiya Vaishnavas, including, notably, Prabhupada's friend Vishwambar Goswami from the Radharaman temple, glorified Prabhupada's qualities and accomplishments, and then a grand feast was served. Early the next morning, Tamal Krishna, Bhavananda, Abhiram, and I prepared to leave for the Delhi airport en route to Calcutta and Mayapur, carrying flowers from the Samadhi for the Pushpa Samadhi in Mayapur. We had an early flight, and we were supposed to leave for Vrindavan at 3:30, but we just couldn't manage to get out. First, we couldn't all gather, and then when we did, we couldn't fit all luggage in the trunk and on top of the taxi with one thing and then another. We just couldn't manage to leave. We only thought that we were doing everything, Bhavananda remarked, but actually we were completely dependent on Srila Prabhupada. We can't even get into a taxi on our own. I thought of Arjuna, who, though he was a mighty warrior, couldn't protect Krishna's wives after his disappearance. He told Yudhisthira, "Oh, Emperor, now I am separated from my friend and dearmost well-wisher, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore my heart appears to be void of everything. In his absence I have been defeated by a number of infidel cowherd men while I was guarding the bodies of all the wives of Krishna." Canto 1, Chapter 15. So, there we were, realizing how completely dependent we had been, and still were, and Srila Prabhupada's mercy. Paragraph. In Calcutta, we went to the temple, where we were greeted by many devotees and friends, including Prabhupada's supporter, Sitaram Daga, and two of Prabhupada's children, Vrindavan Chandra and Su Lakshmana. Quote, "Now with Prabhupada gone, who will speak to people about Krishna the way he did?" Vrindavan Chandra asked. Tamal Krishna looked at me gravely and said, "That is a very good question." We drove to Mayapur the next morning. Prabhupada had asked that his Pushpa Samadhi be built near the pukur, or pond, where his Mayapur house was to have been constructed. We held a big ceremony for creating the Samadhi, similar to the one in Vrindavan. There was a deep hole, but instead of placing Prabhupada's body in the hole, we put in the flowers from Vrindavan, then filled the hole with soil, made a mound, placed Prabhupada's photo on it, and planted a tulsi seedling. From Mayapur, I returned with Tamal Krishna to Calcutta, and then we proceeded to Bombay to prepare for the grand opening of Sri Sri Radha Rasa Bihari's temple, an international cultural center. Back in Juhu, he and I stayed together in our new ashram for single men, which we had recently set up in a flat we'd acquired from a tenant in one of our larger old buildings in the back. We shared a room furnished with just 2 thin mattresses on the floor and 2 low bedside tables. Sridhar Swami and Chitrakar were next door, and Haridas was further down the hall by the kitchen. The fourth room was arranged for receiving and serving prasad to important guests. In Vrindavan, Prabhupada instructed us to organize the temple opening the way Maharaj Yudhisthira had organized the Rajasuya sacrifice, with a prominent person in charge of each department. As stated in Krishna, that's Krishna book, I guess, King Yudhisthira arranged to perform the Rajasuya sacrifice. He invited all the qualified brahmanas and sages to take part and appointed them to different positions as priests in charge of the sacrificial arena. Paragraph. Devotees came for the opening from around the world. Ramaswar, as the trustee for the North American BBT based in Los Angeles, gave Mukunda $3,000 and free rein to promote the event. So, using the money he gave me, Mukunda recalled, I took a flight from Los Angeles to New York, and I went to the street side copy shop on 6th Avenue and made printouts of all the slides I had of the Juhu temple, some of which were truly magnificent. I then took an Air India flight to New Delhi and got a list of all the foreign media located there. My first stop was the Los Angeles Times. I arrived about 15 minutes later than my appointed time. The woman who was the bureau chief was wearing tennis shoes and was angry that I was late because she said that I would make her late for her tennis match. So I left her the printouts of the Juhu temple and moved on. At the office of the New York Times, the bureau chief was very friendly and had a copy of the Macmillan edition of Bhagavad Gita as it is on his bookshelf. I then visited a few more people, including some Australian media and ABC television bureau chiefs, and I left printouts of the Juhu temple with all of them. A few days later, I was visited by a news representative named Ramanujan. He said that he thought the Juhu temple opening would make a good story for Newsweek, so he also wanted to publish another article. Hare Krishna is here to stay. He was very favorable. A photographer named Janagir Gazdar was eager to take photographs of the events at the temple. In Bombay, working with Gopal Krishna and others, I met many people eager to promote the event, and the Indian Express published a 2-page article with the headline stating that A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami was the greatest ambassador of Indian culture to the world. Quote, paragraph, many of the people I visited in Delhi actually came for the opening from the New York Times, Australian television, ABC News, and others. Barry came. Those are the person's name. His last name is Kame. Barry, C-A-M-E, from Newsweek, flew in from Hong Kong. Most of them stayed at the nearby Holiday Inn. Apparently their bosses thought the event was important enough to justify their flying to Juhu. Unquote. No, this is Girish. We gave Mukunda a room in the guest house for the media people to keep their cameras and other gear, and assisted by Abhinandan, he organized gift packets for them. Paragraph. In addition to making all the preparations for the grand opening ceremonies, we also had to arrange for the functioning of the project after it opened. Bali Mardan, one of the prominent temple leaders in America based in New York, came to run the guest house, now finished and finely carved red and white sandstone, which kept the salty ocean air from penetrating the reinforced concrete and corroding the structural steel. Each of the 50 guest rooms, half of which were air-conditioned, had a balcony overlooking the palm trees. The west tower had the bank's extension counter on the ground floor and Prabhupada's quarters on the top floor. Paragraph. Michael Lord, that's his name, who for a decade had managed London's historic and prestigious Carlton Club, arrived to oversee the restaurant, which would serve continental and Indian-style vegetarian dishes all offered to the Lord before being relished as prasad. Paragraph. 2 more pages. Jagat Purush had always done what was necessary for the project, from cooking to deity worship to life membership. He had a flair and a passion for Krishna-conscious theatrical performances, and he would take charge of the Bhaktivedanta Auditorium. The theater would be among India's most sophisticated and versatile, with a seating capacity of 425, the most advanced sound and lighting equipment, probably it's now ancient, 16 and 35 millimeter projectors, definitely ancient, stage lifts for special effects, a recording studio, green rooms and dressing rooms for the performers. Burjo Mistry, the consultant architect for the Bombay National Center for the Performing Arts, and the foremost theater builder in India, had done the design. When he heard that ISKCON is planning a theater for devotional performing arts, and that it would be part of a project that would include a modern guest house and traditional temple, he had been moved to donate his services. And Dravida, a BBT editor based in America who was in India on assignment for Back to Godhead, wrote, quote, Srila Prabhupada's inspiration provided a modern setting where everyone can delight in India's rich devotional culture. In fact, many people say that the Bhaktivedanta Auditorium will herald the renaissance of devotion in the performing arts. Paragraph. Narottamananda, who had a fine artistic sensibility and had served as a pujari in Vrindavan, came to be the head pujari and set up the expanded deity program as he had done in Vrindavan. Paragraph. As per Srila Prabhupada's instructions, the installation of the deities were performed by a combination of Brahmins and Prabhupada's disciples. There was one procedure for installing the new deities and one for moving the already installed deities of Sri Sri Radha Rasi Bihari to their new location. Different senior devotees sat with different small Utsav deities. I was with Sita Devi. Paragraph. Interviewing me for the Back to Godhead article, Dravida asked if I could tell how I got involved in the Bombay Project. Well, read my book. Tells you all about it. In March of 1972, Srila Prabhupada asked me to take charge, I replied. This was 1 month after we had gotten possession of this land at Juhu Beach. At first, we were living in a hut. It was really difficult, but eventually we built an additional floor on top of some apartment buildings that were already on the land, and we moved up there. From the beginning, Srila Prabhupada emphasized that this project was for spreading Krishna consciousness. Often, when he came to Bombay, he would ask us how the rooms were being used, and he was very critical if we were not making full use of each room. The point was that every available facility should be used for spreading Krishna consciousness. Paragraph. What were some of the highlights of those early days? Answer. As soon as we got possession of the land, which was called Hare Krishna land, Srila Prabhupada had us put up a pandal and hold a big Hare Krishna festival. We brought the deities Radha Rasa Bihari from our temple in the city And every night, hundreds of people came to hear Srila Prabhupada speak and chant Hare Krishna with us and take up Krishna conscious drama and music performances. It was then that we started to see how Prabhupada had been, how right Prabhupada had been in making Juhu Beach the site for a temple and cultural center. That was all in March of 1972. Answer, yes, but because of legal difficulties, it wasn't until October 73 that we finally acquired full title to the land and could really begin construction. This project is amazingly unique. Whose idea was it? And what were its main features? Answer, from the very beginning, the idea was completely Srila Prabhupada's. Although no one else could understand it at the time, he knew that this land at Juhu Beach would make for a perfect center for spreading Krishna consciousness, It was far enough from the city to have the peaceful spiritual atmosphere of the country, but at the same time, it was near enough to the city to be convenient for most people. So, the Temple Hotel Theater Complex was originally Srila Prabhupada's idea to make it easy for people to come and experience Krishna consciousness? Yes, exactly. Srila Prabhupada had written that it is the duty of the Acharya to engage everyone in serving Lord Krishna. So Prabhupada's idea was that whatever people like to enjoy, a comfortable building, good food, beautiful art, music, drama, dance, whatever they want, they should get it in superlative form with Krishna in the center. In other words, people should be able to experience what the Indian culture really is, glorification of the Lord. And above all, visitors should have the opportunity to chant the Lord's names, and read Srila Prabhupada's books. But a few more paragraphs. Have the people of Bombay responded favorably? Oh, Srila Prabhupada was so far-sighted that at first people couldn't appreciate his vision. But now that the Juhu has developed into one of the most important parts of Bombay, and now that the people have seen the project take shape, they're very enthusiastic about it. Many of them want to take an active part. What does the future hold for the new cultural center? Do you have plans for more construction? Yes. Srila Prabhupada wanted us to construct one more large building, 6 stories, that would include a children's school, a diorama museum, a retirement home, and a book warehouse. He felt that many of Bombay's pious and aristocratic families would want to send their children to our school to cultivate character and self-realization. In other words, Krishna consciousness. He also said that we should include a section for older people, that there are many old people who want to give everything up, surrender to Krishna, pass their last days as vanaprasthas in a Krishna conscious community, and then go back home back to Godhead. So we should provide a facility for them. What people come to stay here at either the guest house or the retirement home, will there be guidelines for them to follow? Oh, yes. To preserve the spiritual atmosphere here, Srila Prabhupada said that we should begin by requesting every guest to follow our 4 regular principles. And this would keep the atmosphere pure? Yes, purity is the force, Prabhupada always said. He told us never to concoct some materialistic scheme for becoming successful. He just wanted us to stay Krishna conscious, do our best, and leave the rest to Krishna. Now, it's 4.5 hours away to get to where that box of books is. I should have brought them, but you can follow. It's nice, just hearing. And there's lots of nice pictures, but he's a good writer. And, he covered many delicate topics in the course of all of this. So we're at page 655, and the book ends at 678, so we may be able to complete tomorrow. Maybe not also. 6:55. Yeah, we should be able to complete tomorrow. And when I've been doing this reading, it's not like, there's no discussion. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Very powerful lessons about, continuing things after Prabhupada's departure. Very, very powerful.